Hello and welcome to Game 6 of CCC 10's qualifying. This is the reverse game of Game 5, and in this one Leela is black, and of course we have the same Czech Benoni opening. If you would like to know more about these opening moves, then please check the previous video. And here now, after Bishop G2, we reach the end of the book. And in the previous game, Rubi played here A6 with the idea to get in B5, but after A4 she didn't continue with preparing B5. Instead he played H6, and after H4 Bishop G4, but this now allowed Leela to win some time on the king side by harassing this bishop, and now after G4 and bishop back, eventually Leela got in a devastating kingside attack. In this one, instead of A6, Leela played knight A6, and the idea is to transfer this knight to C7 and help get in B5. And Leela was expecting here actually knight F3 and knight C7 and castles and rook B8, and then after A4, A6 and eventually B5. But after knight F3 he changed his mind. He didn't go for knight C7 and rook B8 anymore. He went for a kingside expansion with F5. So he played here knight E8. Why am I saying he? She's a female. She played knight E8. Rubi now continued with castles, and now we have F5, a logical move. Leela is gaining some space on the king side, maybe opens up the F file. The game now continued with A3, and now we have F4. Leela is gaining even more space, and if now white takes here, then after E takes on F4, she's gaining the E5 square for a piece. For example, this bishop could land on E5, and white's king side is not so pretty anymore. So instead of taking on an F4, Rubi played here H3 to prevent this bishop from getting there, and now we have G5 solidifying F4, and now B3 and king H8. Leela is preparing a kingside attack. Rubi now continued with bishop b2, and now we have knight b8. This knight is heading to the king side to help out with the attack. Queen c2, Rubi finishes development by connecting the rooks. And now we have rook g8 and b4. Rubi is opening up the b file. Who will strike first, Rubi on the queen side or Leela on the king side? We'll have to see. Leela answered here with b6. And if now b takes on c5, then she wants to take with the b pawn, and actually getting into Leela's position on the queen side is not that easy. b5 looks like a juicy square for that knight, but b5 can be challenged with a6, and this knight now could go to d7 to guard b6 and b8, and the bishop guards b7, so actually getting into Leela's queen side is not that easy. So instead of b takes on c5, we have here knight e1. The knight is anticipating here g4, driving it away, so he's relocating to d3. And now after knight d7, we have knight e2. Rubi wants to take here on f4, making use of the fact that the e5 pawn is pinned to the king. So Leela broke the pin with knight f6. We have now knight d3, queen e8, and this queen is now going to h5 to put pressure on h3 and maybe even win that pawn with the help of the bishop. Now we have rook e1, but after rook g7, Rubi changes his mind and goes back with the rook to the b file. He wants to open it and try his luck there. We have now knight f8, b takes on c5, b takes on c5, knight e1, and now queen h5. And Leela is now attacking h3, and she's very happy with her position. She evaluates this at -2, while Rubi is still on -0.8. And defending that pawn with the king doesn't help, because Leela can still take the pawn, and after the bishop recaptures, there's g4, winning back the piece and continuing the attack. So instead of king h2, Rubi played here g4, which was pretty much forced. But now, of course, the queen doesn't return. Instead of that, Leela sacks the bishop now on g4. And after knight takes on g4, she's even threatening mate on h2. So this is forcing now knight f3. And now we have knight g6, queen d3, and now knight back to f6. and threatening g4. And after the knight moves away, Leela can play knight h4 and then knight f3. The knight is defended by the pawn, and if the bishop takes, then after g takes on f3, not sure if you can follow all these arrows, then the g file opens up with a decisive attack on the white king. So at this point, after knight back to f6 in view of g4, Rubi felt the need to give back the piece with knight g3, and now after f takes knight and f takes on g3, the g file remains closed, and maybe Rubi can get some chances on the open f file. But now Leela played rook g8, and she's planning a new piece sack with knight f4. And if pawn takes, then again the g file opens up. We now have king f2 and queen g4. Leela is attacking e4 now, twice with queen and knight, so this is pretty much forcing knight h2 when the bishop defends this knight and the knight is attacking the queen. But now came the counterattack, knight f4. And all the tactics work here in favor of Leela. For example, if the knight takes the queen, then Leela doesn't take this queen. That would be just a queen exchange. No, she first takes on g4 with check. She won a knight and she's preparing to win back her queen. And the king can't really defend the queen, so it has to counterattack this knight on g4. But now there's knight h2 check, and after king e3 and finally knight takes back the queen, there's nothing better for white here than to take on d3, and now the material is even, but Leela can now win an exchange on f1, and after rook takes on f1, she's up an exchange and the pawn, and that is completely winning. Alternatively, instead of knight takes on g4, there's also pawn takes on f4, winning the piece. But now after queen h4 check, removing the queen with tempo, there's king e2 and then g takes on f4, and now Rubi has two pieces attacked and the attack continues. Best here is bishop f3, but now after queen takes with check, rook f2, there's queen h3 followed up with rook g3 with pressure on the bishop and with a very strong attack continuing. So after knight f4, instead of taking this knight, Rubi tried the queen exchange, but Leela refused it, and now after king g1 we have queen a4. Maybe she's trying to take the c4 pawn, but now Rubi finally takes the piece on f4, but after g takes on f4 there's huge pressure on this bishop on g2. The game now continued with rook f2, and now rook g3, forcing the queen to e2, and now we have queen e8. This queen is coming back to g6, not only to increase the pressure on g2, but also to attack this e4 pawn, which is very hard to defend. We now have bishop c1, queen g6, and now after rook b7, it looks like Rubi is getting some pressure on Leela's position, and he's also a piece up, but the truth is that after bishop d8, this pawn on e4 can be defended because this bishop on g2 is pinned, and if Rubi tries, let's say, king h1 or king f3, it doesn't matter. Leela can still take on e4 because if the bishop takes now here, then there's mate on g1. So instead of trying this, Rubi went for a counterattack with queen b2, and his point is now that after knight takes on e4, this pawn on e5 is pinned, so he can take back the pawn on f4 with the bishop. But Leela now took this rook on f2, Rubi took the rook on g3, but Leela saw further. She can now remove this knight with tempo on the queen, and this now allows her to win back her piece. And now we have queen e2, queen takes on g3, and Leela managed to win back her piece, and she is two healthy pawns up. Her king is a bit weak, but now Rubi played queen e4, threatening mate here, and this now allowed Leela actually to exchange the queens with queen e1 check, and after this she's very happy. She's now completely winning. She evaluates this at minus 5.3. We now have queen takes, knight takes, and Leela is even attacking this pinned bishop now twice, forcing the rook back to defend. And now Leela wants to trade down everything on g2 and get into a winning endgame, but before that she can even afford here to play e4 to allow her king to get to d4 and win down this c4 pawn. We now have rook e2 attacking this pawn, and now Leela decides to cash in. They exchange the rooks and the knights, and now we have king g7, and the king is in time to defend this pawn. We now have knight f1, king f6, knight g3, king e5, and now to not allow the king to d4 we have knight e2. But here comes now the h-pawn distracting the king. The king has to go back now to g2 to meet this pawn on h3, but this now allows Leela to play e3 and try to attack the c4 pawn like this. We now have king f3 attacking this pawn, bishop g5 defending, and now king g4. And here now king e4 quite simply wins, because after king takes on g5 and h3, the knight can't stop both pawns. But Leela chose another route, and here after king g4 she dropped the bishop back to f6, and after king f3 she played king f5, and after the king takes on e3 there's king g4 taking away the f3 square from the king, and after king f2 there's a6, king g2, and now h3, and the king is now forced away from the f3 square also, because if it goes to f2 then h2 comes, and after king h1 there's king f3, and now nothing can stop the king to take the pawn on c4. Rubi continued here with knight check to win the h3 pawn, but now he's losing the c4 and the d5 pawns, and very shortly the a pawn also. Here after bishop back there goes the a pawn, and now she has to push the pawns. Which pawn will she push first? Well, we'll have to see. It looks like it's the a pawn here, and after some more moves here in which the knight tries to get to the a pawn, eventually the knight will be forced away from there, and then we'll have a2. But now after knight c6, instead of promoting the pawn, Leela tries first to give up the bishop, unsuccessfully, and now after knight a5 check, the king decides to hunt down that pesky horse, and after knight c6 check we have king c5, and now the knight goes to a5, and there it is actually trapped, because after bishop b6 he can only go to b7, and now after king c6 there are no more squares for the knight, and after knight a5 check the bishop takes him out. And now finally after king f2 Leela can queen in peace. Rubi played now king e2, and now we have c3. Will we have another queen? Well, after king d3 and c2 the king takes out that pawn, but now with d5 Leela has another chance. King b3, d4, king c2, d3 check, and Rubi's king fights well, takes down another pawn. We now have queen e5, king c2, queen c3 check, king b1, queen b3 check, king c1, and now bishop d2 check. Leela is a giver, she has a good heart, she's giving up the bishop, but now after the king takes the bishop on d2, he finally will get mated, and after a couple of more moves we have king c1 and then queen c2 mate, and the king fought well, but finally he can now rest in peace. Leela managed another very nice kingside attack in the Czech Benoni, this time with black. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other games. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Bye bye.